Welcome to the Convince Me podcast, where we're on a mission to convince you to step outside of your gaming comfort zone and try something new. So let's get to convincing. On the previous episode, Ryan tried to convince me to play a deck building roguelite called Wild Frost. I attempted to convince him to play boomer shooter adjacent high on life, and we've realized that we're both in the situation where we're not we're not going to say that we're convinced to play something if we don't actually have immediate intentions to play it, but that makes it very difficult with how our quarter three and quarter four is shaping up to be. And so we're leaning more into the if I have a time or a chance to play it, we will. So I'm convinced to at least remember that it exists.
Yeah, sure.
Because the idea of us being able to just play what we're actually wanting to play in our actual personal lives, play a game for the show, and also take on these other games that we may or may not ever really put much into.
Huh.
We don't really have the time to do that, as I imagine that many of you listening also just don't have the time to try whatever game strikes your fancy, unless that's just how your attention span is, in which case, man, power to you. I'm pretty jealous of anybody who can just do that, because I have never been one who can.
No.
That being said, on this week's episode, Ryan will be attempting to convince me to play a Warhammer 40k game, Rogue Trader specifically. I will be attempting to convince Ryan to play Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom. Both games are certainly, I imagine, for a very specific niche of person. Ryan, however, says he put a ton of time into his, and I, full disclosure, have trouble remembering the name of my game this week. So we're gonna find out how this week actually goes for
So
the both of us.
you mentioned the state of like quarter three and quarter four with
Mm-hmm.
like games that we've been talking about for a few episodes, like Metal Gear Solid on the way, Mafia, which I want to talk about later, Lost Soul Side, like it's just tons of stuff coming out, and it depending on who you are, it could bode well, especially because we now know that Lost Soul Aside is going to be $60, which is absolutely phenomenal. But
Mm-hmm.
for the question of the week segment, I'm curious, Darren, in your opinion, or in your state, what is your opinion on the state of the video game industry as a whole? How do you think it's faring? How do you think it's doing? Where do you think it's headed? How are you feeling about it?
So this is a very complicated question. I think that it is the best time probably ever to be a gamer, to be somebody who consumes the medium.
Sure.
From an industry perspective, as someone who has no idea what's going on and is purely a consumer and now somebody trying to contribute to the space, I don't think the industry was ready for the amount of success that it's really finding right now. I prior to this point, if we're gonna look at simply the history of modern gaming, we're gonna say from 2000 to 2020, right? So let's look at the last score of years. Video games have been something that have really bolstered their sales through competition, right? The whole concept of the console war, starting with the PS3 and the Xbox 360. Really, I mean, we could argue the Xbox, the GameCube, and the PS2, but I won't even say yet. We'll go ahead and say it really kicked off Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and then the Wii floating in there.
Yeah, sure.
And the whole industry was driven forward on the concept of console exclusives and was driven forward on, well, no, I play Xbox and you play Sony, so we can't be friends, or whatever the hell kids argued about back then.
Don't you
Not
remember
that we
that
weren't part of them.
it's kind of calmed down, But you make a good point, because if you go back as far as Super Nintendo, Super Nintendo,
Nint-
if,
Nintendo.
if you go back to Super
Mama said I
Nintendo,
can't have the Nintendo this week.
they used to make ads that straight up bashed the other company.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest ads for Sega, I don't know if you know this tagline, but it was Sega does what Nintendo don't. And they used to throw jabs at the other company, and they
Hmm.
don't really do that as much anymore. But yeah, it's
It
down to exclusives now.
it never did. They never really did that with Microsoft and Sony, which, like, to be fair, Microsoft versus Sony, if we were looking at it from a not just video game but like a macro perspective relative to the companies at large, that would be such a crazy war to have because of all of the different aspects of technology that they're both in. But
Yeah.
for the sake of this conversation, right? It was all driven forward by exclusivity. And now we're at a point where we have the advent of AI. We have the diminishing of the console exclusive, with now us starting to see things like Forza appearing in PlayStation, with us starting to see Helldivers 2 showing up in Xbox, and the idea of exclusives are now merging, and they're putting more emphasis on the content rather than the hardware, which is or isn't great depending on your perspective and how you see the industry moving forward. Um, and then of course there's the conversation about what should the price point of games actually be. And so I mean, as a gamer, we are we are eating very well because they are just pumping out incredible titles at ludicrous speeds. The Switch 2 is an incredible piece of hardware. We now have full blown modern consoles in our hands, albeit somewhat cumbersome, but they fit in our hands in the forms of the Legion, the Rogue Ally, the Steam Decks, right? And now mainstream consoles are starting to break into it. We've got Xbox apps on our TVs, so you don't even actually need the console anymore, provided you own the content. So it's gamers can pretty much do anything they want on any console. The problem that I now see is that the industry wasn't ready for it. And so we're seeing more layoffs. Despite how great of a time it is and all the games that are coming out, we're seeing more layoffs. We're seeing people potentially or not being replaced by AI. We're seeing voice actors going on strike. We're seeing all of these things from the outside indicating that the industry itself is in a ton of turmoil. Meanwhile, the content that's being produced for gamers largely is spectacular. And so I, I'm not sure I can say that the state of the industry is really in that great of a place, but I do think that where it is simply this place was always going to come as it discovered more and more success, and now it's simply a product of, okay, well, what are they going to do with it? But I think long term we end up seeing a complete blurred line between a Sony or a Microsoft console, and I think it'll really just be, console versus PC, which it kind of always has been.
Xbox has already stated that hardware, they are not 100% sure that hardware is like where they want to go.
Right. And it's not, and it doesn't have to be, because I mean, we're almost at a plateau where unless we have a huge leap in visual, like, television technology, games can only be so much more powerful and require so much more spec, right? The human eye can only perceive so much. And
Yeah.
so as we get to that point where we're no longer so much worried about, graphical fidelity and um like frame rate and things like that, now games just have to be fun.
Which we've come full circle, because back in the day, you were super limited graphic wise, so you had to make your
Mm-hmm.
game just be fun to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Which
think that's
I'm
interesting.
I'm gonna make a a bit of perhaps a hot take. I don't think games were fun. Now, this is looking at it through the modern perspective, so let me just put that as a caveat.
Hmm.
I don't think games were fun until the Super Nintendo.
I don't think that's unfair to say, because back on Nintendo, game game companies were learning what a game was.
Let me caveat Super Nintendo slash Sega Genesis.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
that
yeah.
that time period, because like arcade games were, but they were also a business, right? The Nintendo Entertainment System was there were no save points really, and so a game almost had to be beat in one sitting, and they were made to be hard and frustrating and occupy that space in your brain. That for me is not fun.
You know, the arcade-ness of it bled over into home consoles,
Hmm.
because there was still some aspects of arcade gaming back then, because there weren't as many games. So the developer, so that way you didn't stop playing their game or stop buying their games, was like, hey, we got to make this try hard. We got to make it challenging, so that way they got to learn the ins and outs. Like, it's like if you go to Ghost and Goblins, you got to beat Ghost and Goblins multiple times to get to the actual ending, because once you beat it the first time, the game's like, well, actually, that was all not really. You gotta go actually do it again to escape the nightmare, buddy. And you gotta go freaking beat it
Hmm.
again. And I think it was harder the second time. So, like, yeah,
God, have you ever tried to play Dragon's Lair?
Dragon Slayer is an interesting one because it's a video that
It
you,
is,
like,
but it's
play.
one game. It's one whole quick time event,
Yeah.
and it can still be wrong.
Yeah.
Like that's the most frustrating thing in the world to me. But I could just see myself just like shoving handfuls of quarters into that
Okay,
machine.
so when my brother used to play indoor soccer, I used to have to go, and I didn't want to watch every game. So I remember we went to, I don't know if it was where exactly it was, but I know it had an arcade game. And
I can tell you exactly where it was.
it had a Simpsons arcade beat 'em up. And so what oh,
It
Trashy
sure
Panda
did.
has sent a response. What's up, Trashy Panda? I will read your response in just a second, but I wanted to get my story out real quick. But basically, I remember going there, and the first time I had like maybe $1 worth of quarters, so I was like, boom, 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 let me play or whatever. And then a little bit later, I knew we were going back, so I was like, hey, Dad, I need a sandwich bag full of quarters. And sure enough, I had a like a snack size Ziploc bag of quarters that I bought, and went through every single one to make it to the end of the game, died at the boss with no quarters left. It took me every single quarter I had to get to the ending, and I still couldn't beat it. So I think that bleed over happened in the consoles. And so, like, that I think we saw that. But as far as Trashy Panda said, hey guys, it feels like for most of the industry right now we are in the era of indie games. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Indie games like Peak, Lethal Company, Repo are popping off, while AAA games are doing insane layoffs and going too far into AI, which are making their games objectively worse. The market is incredibly saturated right now, and for every good game, it feels like there are a dozen bad games. I don't know that I could have put it better than that at all. A plus work, beautifully said. That is something that we stand for wholly, because I've had that thought in the back of my head. I just haven't found a way to, like, phrase it as well as you have, because you're absolutely right. Indie games, like, the I think I did the math. Two of the potential four game of the year nominees, I think, are indies, with Claire Obscure, and I think Death Stranding. Kojima
It's
Productions
Kojima.
is it. I think it is indie, but
I mean,
because of whose studio it is, it's not. Um, but you have that, and then you have
Kingdom Come.
Kingdom Come Deliverance by Warhorse Games, which I think might be able to be considered indie. But even then, you have games
Blueprints.
Blueprints, which came out, which is an indie project, and it's just like Death Stranding is as indie as Helldivers is. Yeah, that's fair. That's 100% fair. I think that the triple A studios or quadruple A, they're so focused on needing to make money for investors and paying their employees or whatever that they've lost sight of like why
Hmm.
we're playing anything in the first place.
And I'm even going to go so far as to say, I I think a lot of the problem with AAA titles is the people who plays them. And I find that the people who play a lot of AAA titles are, or at least the vocal ones, right? We'll leave it with the vocal ones, whether that's
Sure.
majority or minority, seem to be the most entitled and want the most things from these titles. Like every AAA title that comes out has to be breathtakingly gorgeous and run impeccably with no glitchy nonsense whatsoever, unless we're in the Bethesda camp.
And then it's
They
expected.
want they want an experience that lasts somewhere between 5 and 120 hours. They want a game with infinite replayability, but also with a storyline that you can follow and make sense. They want like this weird ramping dichotomy that is almost implicitly at conflict with itself. And so what ends up happening is these companies try to appease everybody. And as a result of trying to appease everybody, they make these steaming piles of nonsense that are largely, if you look at the biggest common word that shows up in a lot of these reviews, it's either disjointed or it's unplayable
So
because it's just trying to do too many things and appeal to too many different player groups once. And all of them are loud enough to think that these games are being made specifically for them. And if they're not exactly what they're looking for, they're going to let you have it.
so here is an issue that I have, and like I don't want it to come across like I'm being judgmental because I really don't mean to be, but I one issue that I have is it comes down to sports games a lot of the time, and like the big releases, Call of Duty and whatnot. But the amount of times I've been on social media and seen people be like, "Yo, they didn't change anything this year. This year sucks. This year is this. This year they didn't fix that. They didn't fix this." And then at the end of their 2, 3, 4, 5 minute long rant, they're like, "But I'm gonna get it anyway." And it's like, if you want it to be fixed, stop rewarding them for giving you a mediocrity. That's what they're giving you. And you acknowledge it and you know it, but you don't care. And you keep buying it. And your money tells them, hey, it's okay if your game's not changed or fixed or whatever. I don't care. I'm going to buy it anyway. If you reward them with the money, why are they going to stop doing it? They're not.
And that problem almost goes even deeper because then for a lot of those people, those games make them their income. So, like,
Yeah,
you have to get
I
the
guess.
newest one because now, like, I won't, will you let your principles stand in the way of your money? For some people, the answer is yes. For most people, the answer is no because of how
Yeah.
many people are, one paycheck away from losing everything they have. So, I mean, honestly, that's a whole different issue, I think. Um,
Yeah,
I,
but the last thing I'll say, because I do want to get to our games, because this could be a whole podcast episode in and of itself. But the other thing I'll say is that it's seeping into overseas games. So the Atelier series, for those who don't know what that is a series of like cozy, I'd say double A games where you play as an alchemist who creates things for people because alchemy is this big thing in these worlds, and it's super nice, cozy JRPGs because there are RPG elements in them. And they recently released Atelier Yumiya, which is a game that came out earlier this year, and it received mixed feedback. And the interesting thing about it was the company that makes them, I think it's Koei Tecmo. Uh,
NIS, isn't it?
Derek, would you do me a favor and check my work while I
I think it's
try before I
NIS, but
forget
yeah.
what I want to say? But basically, they said that Atelier Yumiya was their Their objective of that game was to reach a wider Western audience, which is why the game essentially got rid of turn-based combat, because they wanted to reach a wider audience, because turn-based combat doesn't have as a far-reaching as like action gameplay or whatever. And so they've said that they're going to be making two versions of their Atelier series. They're going to have like the classic like Atelier turn-based games, and then the Atelier Yumiya Light games, where they're going to be making them more action-focused to reach a wider Western audience. And my response to that is, why? Why? Make the game you want to make. If you want to make an action-based game and go in that direction with Atelier, that's awesome. But don't do it to reach a wider audience, because then you're reaching no one. Don't do that.
It
and we
is.
have...
It is in fact Koei Tecmo.
Yeah, Trashy Panda, you're absolutely right. Most AAA titles rely on the fact that the franchise keeps making money. Someone always buys the next COD, so why would they make the next COD amazing if it's going to sell either way? That's exactly right. I like... What reason do they have? Call of Duty, up until now, with apparently Battlefield 6 is going to be amazing, up until recently, Call of Duty really hasn't had a ton of competition since, like, what, COD Blops? Like, I would say Modern Warfare, but even then there were still some others, like, I don't know if Medal of Honor was still prevalent at that point, but you have Medal of Honor, you had Battlefield... Halo. You had all those, but now, if you ask somebody, when you think of a first-person shooter, people are saying Call of Duty. People are ignoring, like, Titanfall. Where's Titanfall 3? People want Titanfall 3, EA. Throw it out there. Titanfall 2 is known for having an incredible story, and it's a first-person shooter. It's concise, it's short, it's sweet. I think I beat it in, like, 8 hours. I think that's about the length of time it takes people. But, like, I don't know. That's a whole other thing. Like I said, we could have a whole entire episode just about the state of the gaming industry, but that's not what we're here for. We are here to convince you to try some games. So with that said, I'm going to be talking about a game that over the course of the past week, I have locked in about 20 hours into this game in the past 7 days.
That's crazy.
I know. I know it is. So, my game of the week was Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader by Owlcat Games. And the other games that they've made are in the similar style of CRPGs. Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader by Owlcat Games. Super fun. 20 hours in. A CRPG stands for, I believe, computer RPG. And if you have heard or seen Baldur's Gate 3, it's in the same vein. And I'm going to make a statement that may seem bold, but I don't think it is.
Go on.
Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. Given maybe a slightly larger budget and maybe a little bit more time, could very potentially be on the same level as Baldur's Gate 3.
Why?
So, I guess I said Baldur's Gate 3. If you don't know what that is, it is essentially a top-down, isometric role-playing game. And it is very specifically a Western role-playing game because there is a heavy emphasis on dialogue and actually being a character, your stats that you have in your character impacting the story at large, and dialogue options. Combat is turn-based. Like, that's CRPG. So it takes place in the Warhammer universe. And as somebody who's never, other than playing a couple Warhammer games here and there, like I played Vermintide 2, I've played Space Marine, and I think I've played a couple of others. Those are like my only um uh my only exposure to Warhammer has been like those games. So I hop in this game, and you start with your character creator, and you choose so many aspects of your character. You choose their stats like strength, fellowship, perception, intelligence. You create their stats based on where they're from and their background. So you choose what type of world they're from. There's like Forge world, Imperial world. Like what type of world are they from? That impacts their stats. You choose their background. Like when I play games like this, I like to build a charismatic character because I like to see how many of the conversations I can talk my way out of. And so I built an officer, which is one of the classes or archetypes. And all of my origin, my background, there's like a triumph that you have, and then you have to choose basically like a dark time in your life. And all of those choices shape what your character is capable of. All of my choices shaped a character who was a silver-tongued noble.
You
And
no way.
I know.
No way that's what you chose. No way.
I know. It's crazy. But
Oh my.
you have four archetype choices at the beginning. There's officer, soldier, warrior, and operative, I think, was the fourth one. And so each archetype has obviously different stats, but I didn't realize until I started playing exactly how different they were going to be. But going back to the Warhammer universe, I don't know any terms or people or things, and this game just peppers you with them. So the game starts with you, like you choose your background, you get on this ship, and you're talked to by basically the right-hand man of the captain of this ship. They're called the Seneschal. And they start talking out, they start throwing out terms like the warp, uh, God Emperor, Techno Priest, and it makes me laugh because everything in this game in the Warhammer universe is just two really cool terms fused together, like Techno Priest, and there's just stuff like that throughout, and to the point where we started hearing about there were these things called machine spirits. And I'm like, what the heck are those? And they're like, literally, spirits in machines. And I'm like, oh, snap. This is awesome. And so, all these terms are being thrown at you. And just like in a lot of CRPGs, you have the option to go over highlighted terms, and it will tell you what those things mean. So you don't need prior knowledge to enter this world, this universe, because the game will fill you in organically by just you looking at a word and being like, what is that? And then you go hover over the term, and it just tells you what it is. You're like, oh, okay. And so by the time I was done, they're not done, but by the time I reached the point where I was looking at phrases and I was comprehending the things that people were saying, even though to somebody who's not versed in the world or universe would look at it and be like, those aren't real things. So you naturally learn what these terms are. So you go on the ship and they're like, hey, the captain of the ship wants to see you. And you go meet her, and as you're talking to her, chaos erupts on the ship. And you're like, oh crap. So she tells you to go do something. You have a couple of choices to make, but you have to go and like help things on the ship. And you find out why you're helping her, because you're like, why the heck am I here? You find out that you are of blood lineage to her, and she is a rogue trader. Hence the name of the game, Rogue Trader. And a rogue trader is a hereditary title that you can only get if you have a rogue trader lineage. And a rogue trader is somebody who goes out and their job is to chart the universe, to chart the unexplored places that we've never been, to go and brave these things, and they might as well be royalty. Because rogue traders have unlimited money, which I'll get to in a second. So you are tasked with going to the ship, and then you go to this place where she tells you to go, and you initiate combat. Combat operates like any CRPG. It's turn-based. And I chose an officer because I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, but Silver Tongue, cool. So every class has special abilities in combat. The officer's job is to support allies and give them extra abilities and extra protections. So the way it works is when your turn comes around, you have a toolbar, which is all your abilities. You press Y to access your toolbar and do these things. You have AP points, ability points, which allow you to do certain things per turn. And then you have your D-pad, which is how you select things to, like your basic attack and basic item use is on the D-pad. So my turn order would look like I press Y to bring up my toolbar. I use my abilities, like some of my abilities were to give an ally, I could make my ally go in front of me. Like, give them basically an extra attack that they could use right then and there. I also could make them my servant, and your servant would get different buffs, like they would get extra dodge and extra health and all these other things. And you have other abilities that do things for your allies, and if you use it on the person that you made your servant, then they get even more buffs, so you're encouraged to buff them even more. And so my turn would look like using all those, and then I'd go to my D-pad to select a gun or a melee weapon to fire, and then I'd fire it. And its combat in that sense is like XCOM, where there's cover. If you shoot at an enemy, it'll give you a preview of how likely you are to hit them, how much health you're likely to take if you do hit them. And then you do that, your turn's over. You also later get these things called heroic acts and desperate measures. So there's a momentum bar, and every time you do something, that momentum bar slowly fills, like attacking an enemy, using an ability, getting hit. All these things build the momentum bar. And when that momentum bar reaches a certain point, you get a special ability that can only be used once it reaches that point. The officer's heroic act was to give an ally a full extra turn. So when I gave my ally a turn, they only got like 2 ability points, so they could probably use one of their abilities and then fire a gun. Cool, neat. But my heroic act was to just give them all movement, all ability. You get a full-on extra turn to go again, which I normally gave to my sniper. And so you do your combat, and then I'm not going to spoil it because I do. The story had me absolutely hooked. Things happen, and then eventually you get a ship. So you get your ship, and you realize that, like, oh crap, this ship I have is beat up. So the first chapter of the game is you finding a navigator, finding somebody who can repair your ship, getting pieces for your ship so that it can move again. And then I made a mistake that will haunt me for a very long time. I accidentally went to a planet. Granted, there was no way for me to have known this, but I went to a planet that basically forced me to leave the system I was in. I accidentally pushed the story forward and missed 2 entire planets out of the 4. I was so mad. Because you go to this one planet to get people, you get some more crew members, and when you're done in an area, this cult called the cult of the Final Dawn, or the Final Dawn cult, they steal the sun in the system that you're in. And so you're like, oh crap, we gotta go. So naturally, you dip out of there. And I was like, I didn't know that was gonna happen, so I lost access to 2 full-on planets. I was real mad. But
I mean, maybe you just finally got tired of playing games on easy mode.
look,
So you skipped 2 planets worth of things that could have made it easier. Good for you.
oh my god.
Good for you.
Why would you need a sun? Trashy Panda, you know what? That's a great question. Who needs the sun anyway? The cults of the Final Dawn can take it. Who cares? They need it more than I do. Or the people of the system,
They
I guess.
were they were just missing the light in their lives.
Now keep in mind, I went here and then you go to one more place to do some story missions. And that took me about 17 hours to do all that. And then my last 2 hours were to you go to this place called Footfall, and then you do some story stuff, and you'll see it if you play it. And then they're like, all right, guys, we need to go chart these other areas because we need to do something about this cult. Then the game opens up, and you have a whole star map of places you can go. A whole star map. Oh, I forgot to mention, it took me 15 hours to get to my first spaceship combat, because there's also space combat in this game. Space combat operates very similarly. You move your ship forward, you have attacks or whatever, but what's interesting is that your ship's placement and positioning matter, because your attacks only come out of certain parts of your ship. You can either shoot directly port or directly starboard, or you can shoot kind of left and right of the bow. And if there's a ship that's not in those areas, you have to figure out a way to turn your ship. But your ship can't turn on a dime. You have to use momentum to move forward and then slowly turn your ship. But the cool part is that you can assign crew to different parts of your ship, and as you do that, you unlock new abilities to use. So my player character that I made was I think Starship Commander, I think was the position. And putting her there unlocked the ability for the ship to U-turn. So I could have my ship U-turn for more maneuverability. And as you fight with space combat, you level up the ship, and you get new unique abilities as long as somebody is assigned to the role of that thing, and each ship role is benefited by a character stat. So my main character, my PC that I made, had the highest perception, and so the Starship Commander needed perception, so I assigned her to it. And so as I'm going through, I made some choices. Like at the end of the first chapter, I had a choice of like saving some people over here, or helping with these people, or focusing on my crew and doing something. And you make that choice, and going forward for the entire rest of what I played, that choice would come back up, and you knew that choice would come back up because during certain dialogues there were blue words. And if you hover over the blue words, it'll tell you what choice you made to make this event happen. So, like, I was a noble, and so there were a few moments where I saw a blue word, and I hovered over it, and it was like, your background is being a noble, or you were raised as nobility. And so that's the game telling me, hey, this choice that you made impacted what's happening right now. So they tell you when your dialogue comes back around. So by the time I finished, I had just gotten to the first map, and this is where the game gets even crazier for certain people. There's co-op, and you can work or play with up to 5 other people because it is 6 people parties. And so it's like, so I looked up reviews of this game, and when it first came out, apparently it was buggy as all get out. It was like a disaster because of how buggy it was. And as playing it now, nothing. There are like a few button prompts, like when I wanted to move a character, like when you're in combat and your movement is demarcated with green squares, like anywhere in the green you can move. And if you press A once, it'll show you a preview, like it'll show you like whose line of sight are you in, what's your cover gonna be, and things like that. and then you have to press A again to then move them to that spot, which you can't undo. There were a few times where I would press A and then nothing would happen, like no preview would show up or anything, but all I had to do was just press A couple more times. And I'm like, if that's it, like that's the buggiest thing I've experienced in my 20 hours of this game, that's fine. that's whatever. And so it's a good intro into the Warhammer universe. Like, people who know about the Warhammer universe, like, I looked up this game on Reddit and people were like, yeah, it's a fantastic intro whether you know about Warhammer or not. And I had fun. I put 20 hours in a week. And keep in mind, I didn't start it until Sunday. So I did 20 hours in 6 days. 6 days! And I have to tell you something. I'm not gonna stop. I'm absolutely gonna keep playing. So, I think it's fair to say, if you liked Baldur's Gate, but you want more sci-fi, dark, it's super dark, which I think makes sense for Warhammer. One of our listeners, I think, is a Warhammer fan. You can attest to this. I feel like Warhammer is like incredibly dark all around, but I had so much fun, man. Like, that's the best push I can give. It was just so much fun. Anything else that you'd like to know? I feel like there's so much stuff to talk about. Is there anything
So when are you buying your first minifigures?
Okay, so I will not be getting a Warhammer, which I know, to the chagrin of one of our listeners. I'm sorry, dude. Um, I I would want to, but I don't have a way to show this. If you were to look at my bookshelf of just D&D books,
Mhm.
if I got in a Warhammer, no. No.
I mean, just think of how much free space you'd have once Sarah left you for putting more money into hobbies. Solves itself.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. My wife's half of the basement could just be the Warhammer zone.
Done. Perfect.
Sorry, hun. No,
You don't need kids' toys when you have Warhammer minifigures. That's Henry Cavill would be proud. No, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna play this at some point. I mean, I still need to play
especially
all of Baldur's Gate 3, but
didn't
um,
didn't this game come to Humble Bundle?
yeah, I believe it was free last month. I'm
So then
almost
you
certain.
own it.
Yes, I do. Um, let me check that.
I
But
believe it was
I'm
last month
pretty sure
because
it
this
was
month,
it was recently free.
if it wasn't last month, it was the month before. Because this month has some bangers
It
of
was
free
it
games.
was it was last month, yeah, with Rogue
Yeah,
Trader, which
this
of course I claimed last month. Honestly, for me was like crazy good.
yeah, the past couple months of Humble Bundle have been very nice. Sponsor us.
I'm
But yeah,
saying,
no,
guys, if you don't know anything about Humble Choice, just know that for $14.99 this month, they gave you Persona 5 Royal just to have it forever, which is still $60. So you can
that
get a
alone.
$60 game for 15 and then also get 7 other games whether or not you ever play them. In fact, 2 of those games have already been on our podcast.
Yeah, they have.
Shout
Little
out Banishers, Ghost of New Eden, and Lil Gator
little
Game.
Gator game.
Bro, now you can finally have it for your son.
I know, I
It's
know.
perfect.
But yes, I'm
But yeah, I
glad you
mean,
were
I'll
convinced.
definitely play it at some point. I honestly, again, I cannot tell you when that's ever gonna be. But I mean, I own it. I can technically play it on the go.
It would be a
At that
great
point,
game on
why
the
why
go,
not?
man.
Yeah.
But yes, that is
Now,
Warhammer 40k. If anybody has any more questions, I would love to talk about it. I did play with some friends, so I did experience the co-op, and The only issue that people might have is two things. One, you don't get all 6 characters at the beginning of the game. The game is single player for the first couple of hours.
Sure.
More like 30 minutes. It's single player for the first 30 minutes, and then eventually you get another companion, but you don't get all 6 at once. So you'd have to have people who are willing to watch until they can play. And then the other thing is only the first character is the main character. Everybody else is just like crewmates
Mm,
or people on the ship of the captain. But
sure.
like the people I played with didn't care. And so we had a great time.
And I mean, to be fair, you're talking about waiting a couple hours to get characters of a game that How Long to Beat says is average 63 hours, but for completionist runs could take you 155 plus.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's a couple hours in the context of a month's worth of hours? I mean, I don't, it's not a month's worth, I know that, but
You
it
see the
feels like
most
it because you're not playing 24 hours a day.
you see the most recent chat? They're trying to get me.
Oh, no.
They're trying to get me.
Hey, hey, I listen.
They're trying to reel me in. So
I'm
if you're not,
not mad that you live what 850 plus miles away because that means I won't be joining. There's literally a Warhammer store in the plaza of one of the targets we go to, and I have
so
stayed far away from it because that's just not a world that I can broach.
yeah, there's a Warhammer store like less than like 15 minutes away from where I live. So great times. But with that said, enough about Warhammer.
Yeah,
Yes, I want to do Warhammer, but I can't. I can't. Darren,
which means he will. Y'all got him. If as long as you convince him to say yes one time, you got him. He'll do it. He's in. It'll start slow. He's gonna be real lazy with painting minifigures, but you got him. His minifigures won't be pretty. He's probably
Oh
gonna
my
end up having his
gosh,
wife
dude.
do it. He's gonna end up having his wife do it, which is gonna be her way into Warhammer. So like once you have him buying minifigures that she paints, you have the whole house.
My
So like
Warhammer
credit to y'all.
401k. I can't. No, can't do it. I can't do
Anyway, all right. So it's funny that we talked about this some already today, but Ryan, I'm gonna throw it back to you to the Sega Genesis.
it. Okay.
Did you ever play the game Joe and Mac?
Play it? No. Seen it played? Yes.
Okay. So games of that ilk, right? The action adventure platformer type.
Mm-hmm.
Joe and Mac, for whatever reason, has lived rent free in my head for how old am I? God, so like 28 years now. It would have been rent free in my head because I never had a Sega Genesis, but some of the kids, like my friends' houses that I used to go over to when I was young, they did. And so that was my exposure to Joe and Mac, to classic Sonic the Hedgehog,
Yeah.
to side scroller type games of that ilk. To my surprise, when I stumbled upon Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, it's just basically that,
Okay.
right? It's a game where you get all of, well, that's not true. You actually start off with a beautifully animated anime cutscene
I like
and
anime cutscenes.
a full written song, like theme song for the game, which you can choose to either play in English or Japanese. I can tell
Oh,
you which one is better by substantial margins, but
I
it is what
wonder.
it is. Uh-huh. And it just kind of dumps you in. And so you're on this island, which for a 2D side-scrolling platform adventure game, the art was it's kind of exactly what you'd expect for a game for a younger audience, certainly. But it was so well done. The lines were so clean. Everything looked like it belonged there. Like I'm not going to compare it to some of the graphical games that we have today, but I didn't expect for it to look as good as it did. It felt like you were. It felt like what they had realized was exactly what was in somebody's head when they came up with it. And you were literally just playing through somebody's thought progress. Like,
That's
I
fun.
don't know how else to explain it. It's pretty cool, though. But so you land, and you are a boy named Jin, you discover that your uncle is spreading chaos all over the kingdom, and you
Chaos
see this
control.
old dude. You see this old dude flying around on this magic broom, changing sizes of stuff, making some stuff bigger, some stuff smaller, mostly animals. And then you just go, and you have a jump, and you have an attack, and you have a crouch. But then they start throwing stuff at you that, again, I didn't really expect. And it's a 2D side scrolling platformer with equipment. And
Oh.
one of the pieces of equipment that they give you are iron boots, which as you equip them, you move super slow. But what you realize is when you jump over platforms where there's water underneath you, what happens in classic Sega games? Right? You die.
Mm.
You don't die. You can swim across the top. Now there's fish that attack you. You attack super slow when you're swimming. Um, when you equip the iron boots, you sink. And so you can actually walk on the ground of the floor of this little sea and find more things, find secrets, treasure chests, what have you. So they give you depth to a 2D level when, of course, they couldn't do that in Sega. Some of the secrets actually take you to the background of the images of the foreground. So, like, there's little islands in the background that sometimes you can find a secret and end up being teleported to the background where you're a smaller version of yourself doing like a small puzzle to unlock some stuff. But the equipment was actually super interesting because it gave you a lot of variability and you can change equipment pretty quickly. But you go through, you progress, you end up encountering in this first level your uncle, grandpa, uncle.
Uncle Grandpa.
Um, yeah, basically. And you end up in your first boss fight, which of course there were boss fights back in the Joe and Mac days, but it was always disembodied face from this side or disembodied face from this side, doing something and turning it into a quasi side scrolling bullet hell. In this, there's this giant squid that appears before you, and he's got tentacles slamming down and stuff comes down from the top. Not long before this, though, right before you get into the boss fight, you end up getting a magic power.
Ooh, I
So
like
not
magic.
only do you have a sword, you can shoot a fireball. But their fireball has ammo, so you have limited uses of it. Um, and so the boss fight itself pieced up of okay, dodge the stuff coming in from above, dodge the stuff coming in from the side with your jumps and whatnot. There is a shield that you get, but the shield is more a piece of niche equipment rather than it will block all the damage for you. So the shield that I got early game, if an enemy uses a fireball at you and you put your shield up, there is it says 50%. It's definitely higher than 50%. A 50% chance that it will just reflect it back at them.
So how do you have
Um,
to beat him?
you just attack the tentacles that slam down. That's pretty much all you can do.
Okay.
You can hit them with the fireball; it does more damage, but there's just a giant health bar at the bottom of the screen. And I'm not going to lie, this thing blasted me over and over and over again. But again, it's clearly a game made for a younger audience. And so then this little like dragon thing starts floating in and starts dropping more heart containers and
That's
starts
nice.
dropping like more of the fireball spells to recharge your fireballs so that you can use them more often in the course of this boss fight. So eventually the game has a pity system built in so you can only bang your head up against something for such an amount of time.
Sure.
And at the end of the boss fight, your uncle pulls some shenanigans and introduces you to the main mechanic of this game when he turns you into a pig.
Is this a is this a monster capturing game?
It is not.
Are you a blue mage?
Um, kind of.
Oh.
Insofar as eventually you gain the ability to transform into different animals that have different abilities. So when you're the pig, he ends up dropping you into like a sewer system. But the pig has a super refined sense of smell, and so there's these areas that are pretty obvious. But if you're the pig, you can use your nose and uncover hidden things in that area. So sometimes it's switches to move gates. Sometimes it's treasure chests that you can find. And so there's different ways of interacting with the world. I didn't progress far enough to get many of these, but some of the other ones you can get a snake that lets you slither into smaller areas and shoot poison. There is a dragon which lets you fly and shoot fireballs. There's the pig, of course, and so it gives you a pretty good amount of variability as you progress through the game for these different things that you can do to transform in order to overcome the challenges in front of you. But at its core, what this game really is it's somehow a 20 plus hour game
Wow.
for a 2D side scroll. Exactly, for a 2D side scrolling adventure game that, according to how long to beat, if you want to 100% it, it could take you as much as potentially 30 hours. If you just do main story, it's about 18. Uh, Depends on who you read and who you talk to and who's commenting. But you end up getting, 18, let's say 18 to 25-hour game that will bring you back to the times that were just Sega Genesis, where it was simple, except it's got some of the more modern amenities, equipment, and puzzle solving that just make it a fun game for somebody who you want to introduce to video games,
Sure.
um, but you want to make sure that they're introduced to more like a modern take on a classic, right? Because I mean, at its core, well, not maybe not every, but almost every game back in the day was a 2D side-scrolling platform game where you interacted in some way, right?
Sure.
We can make the argument that that is how Metroid and Castlevania started, right? So you can try to claim that it's that, but it is more like the Joe and Max and the Sonic the Hedgehogs than it is a Metroidvania or a Metroid or a Castlevania game, right? Um, because there's not a lot of verticality to it. It's just across. And then sometimes there's water that you can go into. Maybe they do add some sky components once you can fly. I don't know. I didn't get that far. But a great game to either just sit down and play and not care about because it doesn't take itself too seriously. So you can drop in, go clear out a board and move on, or use it to introduce a younger gamer who you don't necessarily want to boot up Joe and Mac and try to make them play a Sega Genesis game, but that's how we all started. So for you to appreciate where games are, you got to appreciate kind of where they came from.
Yep.
This is a great mix of both because then there's the equipment aspect of it, which lets you change the way that you go through the world. And so I was not necessarily prepared for the fact that it was going to be that way, but it was. And it was a game that, quite frankly, for somebody who's really busy, was very easy to pick up and put down
Yeah.
because you just could, right? It doesn't take itself seriously. There's not a ton of depth to it. Pretty much you go, you clear a board. I was saying I was probably clearing boards in because I'd like to explore everything. It was probably taking me a little longer than it should have, but I probably got from start of game to first boss in about an hour,
Yeah. I was
and
gonna
it probably
say,
didn't need to take me that long.
were you rewarded for exploring?
Yeah, but I mean, most of what it is money, and so the things that money lets you buy are you can refill your fireball spells, um, you can refill your health. There's a potion you can buy that's basically a free revive that'll give you a full health again when you die. So like stuff like that, and there's probably when you unlock more spells, there's probably more uses for money, but there's a couple equipment shops too. I had enough money from my exploration to just buy out everything. The platforming is every bit as frustrating as an old school platformer, which was both simultaneously nostalgic and really irritating. But you have to appreciate it for what it was. Nowhere near as difficult as like
The
the
Lion King.
Aladdin or the Lion King games.
Okay,
Definitely not
that's
as
good.
frustrating as that.
That was good.
But honestly, a lot of the way that it played was like if they remade the Aladdin Sega Genesis game because your interaction is somewhat similar, if they remade it modern and gave Aladdin the ability to have equipment, it wouldn't be that different.
Yeah.
And so
That's
I mean it's kind of a good time, man. As your son gets older, this would be a great game to have him play because it's not that serious. It's a good way to get used to playing games that are what like more complicated, I suppose, um, without being a complicated game itself. For somebody who's had a lot of experience playing video games, it's definitely a game that you can just pick up, see how it draws you in, and put it back down. Um,
Yeah.
which is kind of up. I'll be honest, it's kind of what it was for me. I picked it up, I played it, I put it down. It didn't occupy a ton of space in my brain, but it was fun to play while I played it.
So it's not going to be a game of the year. Well, it's old, so it wouldn't
Well,
be. But
it
it
is
wouldn't have
it's
been a
older,
game of the
yeah.
year contender, and but
No.
you enjoyed your time that you spent.
Yeah. I mean, I see why it's got overwhelmingly positive reviews. Full price right now if you wanted to buy it on the Switch is $10.
Wow.
So like, okay, that's a $10 easily spent. It has a 9 out of 10 on Steam. It's got a 4.5 out of 5 on PlayStation. So I mean, it's well received. It's
That is
got
well
good
received.
reviews, very, because it's exactly what it is. It's people who want that nostalgic feel of games for how they used to be, without getting bogged down by mechanics and inflated visuals. It's very very similar in its overall appeal to how Indivisible was, except it's an action, like I
Yeah,
press
yeah,
button, I swing sword game, as opposed to more of like the turn-based party combat that Indivisible had.
sure. That makes sense. I mean, yeah,
But
it's
I'd put it
I.
in the same ilk
You put in the same milk as what?
as Indivisible.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, it would go for me personally, just bottom ish of some of the games that have been
Absolutely,
recommended. Only
absolutely.
because I side scrollers, I other than like Sega Genesis Sonic,
Hmm.
I don't know that I've ever put a ton of time into really any side scroller, like period
Mm.
ever.
Really, not even the old X-Men games.
No, like my neighbor
That's
loved them.
surprising.
My neighbor loved them, but like the only other one that stood out to me was K- King of Dragons. King of Dragons, which was like a Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis side-scrolling fantasy beat 'em up.
Mm.
But the reason that kept my attention is because at the end of every level, you would get a new upgraded weapon and stronger spells. So like you were upgrading
Sure,
every time. I still
sure.
remember the being the fighter and going, oh man, I can remember so many sounds from that game. But like, yeah, I see I'm picking up what it's putting down,
I,
and I
I
think
think if I
that
had to sum it
matters.
up succinctly, if you wanted to introduce somebody to the Metroidvania genre without giving them a Metroidvania game, this is honestly a way you could do it.
Fair enough. I think that has its place. Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
It's like I said, it's not for people who've played video games for 30 years unless they like that specific type of game, right? If they want that type of thing, I mean, this is a great game to find. But I mean, honestly, even between like it and Fist, I would play Fist every time
Sure.
because Fist has more in-depth combat as opposed to press button swing sword because there's combos built into it, right? I think for me personally, I found Fist just a better game. That being said, this game in particular, I think everybody should try it, right? It might end up being a game that you consider to be one of your cult classic favorite games. It might be a game you pick up and play for an hour and put it down and never think about it again. But it deserves the 9 out of 10 that it has on Steam. No questions asked.
That yeah, because just because it may not be a style of game for me just doesn't mean that someone's not going to like it. It just means that it could be the
Exactly.
most polished side scroller of all time, a la Hollow Knight. It's still not going to be my preference. But
Right.
I mentioned earlier um, that with quarter 3 and 4 going crazy, and I mentioned that Mafia was one of the quarter 3, quarter 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only I don't know that I am really. So Mafia: The Old Country just dropped as of yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
in recording this episode, and it came out to mixed reviews. I see a lot of 9 out of 10s, a lot of 7 out of 10s,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple 5 out of 10s. However, we've talked about the case for 7 out of 10 games, and they have a place.
Yep.
And Mafia is in a weird spot because Mafia has a, a a special place in my heart. I love the Mafia games because they are story first action games, like shooters. And I looked at the old games a couple days ago because I loved Mafia 2. That was the first Mafia game I had played. And a year or two ago, whenever the definitive collection came out, I played Mafia 1. Mafia 3 was definitely the worst in the series up until that point. And so reviews for Mafia The Old Country dropped 2 days ago. And it is now sitting, as of last I saw, let me confirm. Mafia The Old Country is currently sitting at a 77 out of 100.
That's the
Which
sevenest seven.
which doesn't sound great. However, a lot of people have really liked the Mafia games. And the interesting part is that this review score places this game as the second best rated Mafia out of the 4 that have come out. And if you were to exclude the definitive edition of the first Mafia that came out, that got a 78, which is a remake, this Mafia would be actually the highest rated. Because Mafia 3 is sitting at a 68, Mafia 2 on release got a 76, and the first Mafia got like a mid 70s, low 70s, I think. So technically speaking, this is the best rated Mafia. And it's only $50. But I'm sitting here going, why am I hesitant to buy it? Because I knew that this was going to be a possibility. In fact, it even seems that this could be the best Mafia game yet. By review scores. Granted, I haven't played it. I have deliberately stayed away from gameplay previews because I wanted to see nothing of it. But and I know that there's the whole mindset of like, don't let reviews sway you. But when you have so many games on the horizon, and money is limited and time is limited, I have to use review scores to justify me spending the money on these games. That's the hard part. And there's nothing stopping me from getting Mafia when it goes on sale, because it's gonna.
Okay. So I've kind of waited to say this, to have this conversation for the episode. Um, Historically speaking, the JRPG also doesn't see reviews above 70s historically. Obviously, there's some exceptions, right? IGN will always talk about Final Fantasy VII as the greatest thing that's ever happened to God and anyone. Um, but typically speaking, the JRPG genre does not see above the 70s. How many of those have you implicitly loved?
A decent amount.
A decent amount of them. And even the ones that you haven't loved, you have never regretted for a second playing or owning. If this, from a review perspective, is a higher reviewed game than Mafia 2, which you may or may not remember, but you used to talk about all the time.
I loved Mafia 2.
If this is now, objectively, measurably, by review standards, a better game, why the holdup? Because the point of a lot of these reviews is not, like, in part they compare this game to whatever their standard is for gaming as a whole, right? But the other way that you can look at these reviews is how does it stack up to the others of the series, which is to say, the best.
You're not wrong. I just looked up Bravely Default 2.
Hmm.
Bravely Default 2 has a 77.
There you go.
And I know some people didn't. I liked Bravely Default 2. I had a fun time with it.
Sure. I mean, let's look up. Gosh. Uh,
Let's see, how did Final Fantasy 12 do when it came out?
Probably in the 70s. I mean,
That 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 can't be. That's not right.
what?
Final Fantasy. Why is Final Fantasy 13 sitting at a 52?
No, that's pretty accurate. People didn't like it. It was not well received.
Whoa. Whoa.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
Zodiac Age is doing well. But yeah, no, we've had this
Well, see,
conversation.
so again, Zodiac Age, it had to get a remake where they added mechanics and certain things to it. Like that's new. They added stuff to that, and now Zodiac Age is doing well. Launch Final Fantasy 12 was also pretty mid.
Gosh, these
So like
ads are killing me.
obviously we're getting a resurgence of the JRPG, but historically speaking, the JRPG genre did not see higher than the 70s. Like a good JRPG was 77. And those might be some of the best games of all time.
Okay, so what I saw was not the full view. Final Fantasy 13 got an 83 out of 100. Okay. 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 But
And now
no,
as time goes on, it doesn't age well. But all that is to say, right? This objectively between all of the Mafia games, this is now the highest rated without a remake. And we're not going to count remakes because that gives you the chance to polish and fix,
True.
right? The original on launch intended version, because speaking, if they remade Mafia 2, who's to say it's not in the 80s, right? If they remade Mafia 3 and got rid of the repetitive fluff, who's to say that game couldn't have been better, right? We're not going to talk about do-overs. A pure launch game is sitting as the highest Mafia game of all time. A series that you love. So what's the holdup? And it's $50.
It's only $50.
That's already on sale by modern game standards. To that point, actually, because I saw this article earlier and wanted to bring it up, this is about the perfect time to do so. Take-Two's president, CEO, someone like that, came out about why Borderlands 4 is 70 instead of 80. And his quote is along the lines of, "We want to deliver a product that is more value than what people are paying for." And he felt that 70 is where they hit that benchmark instead of 80. Now, each additional version still is $30 more than the
Yeah.
one before it. So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we
it
can
is.
have that conversation, but this is also a Take-Two game. And so if they're offering it at a $50 price point, it's getting reviewed higher than all of the other games in this series are, which again, you have talked about Mafia incessantly for what feels like 10 years.
Because Mafia 2, I loved it.
There should be no logistical holdup for a 77, but the highest ever.
Fair. Point made. Point taken. We can
Have
talk
I
about
convinced
this.
you?
I'm convinced. You did it. There's other stuff I want to talk about, but I do not want to drag this episode out for forever. We can talk about it next time because the topics I want to talk about are going nowhere. Apparently there's a possible surprise Nintendo Direct coming in the upcoming week or so. So
Potentially.
depending on when it is, and what
It'll be
time it
Tuesday.
is.
It'll be Tuesday at 9 a.m., just like they all have been.
Well, fair enough. With that said, we will wrap up the episode here. Next episode, I'm very curious because apparently Darren has like the game. I don't know what it is. My game is called The Gunk by Imogen from Image Inform Games, and they are known for making the SteamWorld games, like SteamWorld Dig, SteamWorld Heist, and things like that. Darren, what are you playing?
So the game that I am playing for this week is really, it should be considered nothing less than legendary. The game that I'm playing this week might potentially be one of the most important games that has come out in modern times. It, in a lot of ways, has revolutionized what gaming is,
What are you, what are you playing?
and is available as a free game just to download and play whenever you want on PlayStation Plus. And of course, that game is nothing other than Skull and Bones by
You're
Ubisoft.
gonna do Skull and Bones?
One of the most important
No,
games for
no.
its utter catastrophic failure as the first quadruple A title that has ever
I'm
come out
I'm
and
angry
has
that
revolutionized what gaming is
we're
purely because of the expectations versus reality and the indelible damage that it has done to the Ubisoft name.
we're gonna have to
And I am
unpack that.
so excited
We're gonna have
to
to
play
unpack
this
that.
game for free on PlayStation Plus.
We're gonna have to unpack what you just talked about at the beginning of next episode and why it matters. But we're not gonna
Yeah,
do that now. I
that's true.
okay.
The Broncos are about to kick off. These are important things.
I am very excited. Thank you for
I'm
listening.
pumped.
Any audience member in the chat, thank you for being here. It means a lot to have any support, no matter how small you may think it is. It means the world. Please follow us on Convince Me Gaming, Convince Me Podcast, Convince Me Media. They're all here. And with that said, Darren.
Are you convinced yet?
Bye.